Good evening, everybody, and this is Qesheth in '93. It's been a while since I've done done one of these talks. I finally got back to it. I've been really busy. I'm trying to get my camera set up here real quick, so just bear with me. As anyone who's watched these videos knows, I'm not the most technologically advanced person. I'm using my phone because where I live, I can't do a lot of editing or touch up. I can't use that type of software with my internet out here. So anyway, I just want to introduce myself. As you know, I've been doing these talks on the major arcana and the paths of return, talking about the relationship between the major arcana and the path of initiation, because hidden within the symbols of the major arcana is the path of return for the initiate back to the Garden of Eden. But anyway, so tonight, or this evening in Texas, we'll be talking about the Emperor. If you haven't been following these classes, basically I started here with the universe or world path and worked up the tree of life, discussing each one of the paths and which each one of the Atu, or the major arcana, and the relationship to spiritual development. So I would recommend, if you have not, then I would definitely go back and go ahead and start with this first video, and it'll help you to understand the processes involved in spiritual attainment. Regardless of what system you follow, the processes are always the same. And I come from a background of the Western Hermetic tradition, Kabbalah. Uh, I have a very varied spiritual background. I've been studying tarot for 30 years and the metaphysical sciences. I don't know everything. I'm trying to keep these talks as basic as I can and just point out some things to look at. There are some greater mysteries behind some of these cards that I don't have time to point out in these talks. But anyway, meditation upon these symbols, because the unconscious speaks through symbols. The divine speaks through symbols, not through words, but through symbols. And through the understanding of the symbols, the archetypes, the initiate can better understand what's happening, or what may better understand the messages coming through in dreams or in visions. Okay, so an understanding of symbology is very important. Symbols speak, as we all know. But again, we're going to be talking this evening. I will be talking about Path 15 that connects Hakma to the spiritual center, your spiritual center, Tippereth, the sun. The Atu we'll be talking about this evening that I'll be talking about is the Emperor. Now, there has been a change of attributions in the new Aeon. There's been new revelations, but in these talks, I am following the standard traditional attributions. So in the new Aeon, the Emperor was moved here to path 28, and the star was moved here to path 15. The reason being for that is the patriarchal age was seen as ended. Okay, and the star more represents the age of Aquarius that is rising now. But I am sticking with the traditional attributions for the Atu, the cards themselves. But I am incorporating the letter change. Uh, there was a revelation that Zadi is not the star, and so Zadi, at one time, He was attributed to the emperor. Now you may be familiar with that system, and if you are, I understand. But it was found that the He is a feminine number, a feminine name or a feminine letter. I'll get there. Uh, it's part of the tetragrammaton Yod He Vav He. So if you have the Yod He, Bina, Vav, He. So the He was always seen as feminine, as receptive, because He means window. So it's receptive. So the letter itself was changed to the star, which is to me makes more sense. And Zadi, which means fishhook, is now attributed to the emperor. Now, if you're familiar with the older systems, that's fine. You can make that work. But just kind of meditate on that letter change. We will begin with a reading from the Sefer Yetzirah. The 15th path is the constituting intelligence, so called because it constitutes the substance of creation in pure darkness. And men have spoken of these contemplations. It is that darkness spoken of in Scripture, and a thick darkness, a swaddling band for it. So the constituting intelligence, of course, constituting means to organize, to put things in order, basically, like the Constitution of the United States, for instance. And it is that darkness. Okay, so there is a light so strenuous it is not perceived as light. The light of the supernals, okay, if you were to perceive it in your normal consciousness, you couldn't perceive it. It would appear as darkness because you have not reached the energetic level to perceive the darkness that is light. It's past 15. We talked about it being Octo 4, the emperor. 4 is also the number of Hesed. 4 is the number of the material world, the cube. The path name is the constituting intelligence. It connects Chokmah, wisdom, with Tipper, the sun, the spiritual center. It's the river of fire flowing into creation. So because this card is ruled by Mars, it is seen as the river of fire flowing from the supernals. At this level on the tree of life, the initiate has already achieved the initiation, of course, of the Adeptus Minor, which means knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel, the highest spiritual self. And now the initiate is now beginning to be guided in their journey. Before this, in the lower paths, as the initiate has to really work with their intuition, their reasoning mind, their Mars force redirecting, purifying themselves. But once they reach the knowledge and conversation, then they now have a direct communication with their higher spiritual self, who will now begin to guide them for the rest of the journey. Most religions, like Hinduism, for instance, their adepts only reach the initiation of the Adeptus Minor, and you see that in all the gold that's draped in their temples. They have never achieved higher levels of initiation or consciousness. In the new aeon, the keys to the abyss have been opened for the initiate who wishes to merge completely with the divine. The title for this card is the Son of the Morning, Chief Among the Mighty. The Hebrew letter, like I said earlier, was Zadi, meaning fish hook. The fish hook that fishes us out of the waters of Leviathan. Okay? So think about that, the waters of Leviathan, the waters of the material world. This is like the little bait that for some reason you bite. As an initiate, as a seeker, you have some kind of dis-ease within you. You're seeking something. You don't know what, but something begins to pull you. And the next thing you know, you're hooked. And you begin this spiritual journey. And sometimes, not always, it's not pleasant, as we all know. But now you're hooked. And so this is the fish hook. This is will. The will. The will, the HGA consciousness that wishes to be reunited. Of course, the HGA consciousness exists in Kether, but it seeks to be united with its fallen bride. The astrological correspondence for this card is Aries. It's a cardinal sign. It's the first sign of spring, which is an on-rushing force. So cardinal signs are the on-rushing force. The mutable signs are the signs of stabilize the element or season. It's ruled by Mars, and the sun is exalted therein. This shows the HGA consciousness now fully ruling the Mars force within the initiate. The alchemical element for this card is sulfur. In the Vedic system, it would be called Rajas. The three alchemical cards, of course, Daleth, salt. Of course, the Emperor being sulfur, and the Magus being Mercury. These are the three alchemical cards of the major arcana. In the old Aeon, the letter attributed to this card, like I talked about earlier, I'm talking and going over notes at the same time, so bear with me. In the old Aeon, the letter attributed to this card was He, but with new revelations, it is seen that Zadi is the proper letter attribution to this card, and this is my rendition of Zadi. He being a feminine letter is seen in the Tetragrammaton. In the Thelemic system, cruelly changed the path attributions, attributing this path to 28 and the star to this path. I do totally agree with the change of the letters, but for the sake of just making this as simple as I can, for people who are, starting out and wanting to learn, I'm going to stick with the traditional path assignment because of the elemental attributions. We have here the path of the chariot, which is water, the path of the lovers, which is air. We have the path of the hierophant, the earth, and then we have the path of the emperor, fire, and then we have the high priestess, spirit, pure aether, okay, which unites these and creates. And so I'm sticking with the traditional, but I will explain one thing that I do want to explain is the reason. Okay, so again, this is the end of the patriarchal age, kind of dethroned the emperor and put him in a place where he exists within the unconscious, helping us. We still use that force to help rule our unconscious images the same way we do here. And then the star, of course, being He, the final He of the Tetragrammaton, being attributed here. Now we have a lot of female cards here, and here. The Daleth, the Emperor. Okay, so I thought about doing these two cards together, the Empress and the Emperor, but I just decided to just do it the way I've been normally doing it. This is the path of Daleth, and we'll discuss that in the next class. The path of the Empress. She receives, it is also a planetary path of this Venus. She receives the images coming out of the supernals. Okay? These are the archetypes, the images. They exist here. He takes them as they come out of the supernals. Okay, so Daleth, the Empress Venus, is the receiver of the images coming out of the supernals, and he regulates and organizes them. So think about it, the constituting intelligence. He and the Empress are the product of the marriage of the high priestess and the magician. Will and form. He represents the will. She represents the form, the electromagnetic substance that makes up the universe. He represents the discriminating aspect of ourselves, our ability to observe the images coming from our subconscious and categorize them and put them into proper order. The Emperor represents sulfur, the Empress salt. Their union brings about the manifestations of life and phenomenon. This is the marriage of Venus and Mars, the conscious and unconsciousness, the conscious and unconscious forces of our being. So this is alchemy in a nutshell. You read all these ancient tomes, these ancient, all these alchemical works, and look at all this symbology, and it's so hard to interpret. But in a nutshell, most of the symbols basically point to the union of the unconscious and the conscious and the result thereof. These two cards, the Empress and the Emperor, are also the Magician and the Priestess on a denser energetic level. Also, all the female cards in the major arcana and the male cards, all female cards are Bina, manifesting Bina, the Great Mother, manifesting at various energetic levels, and all the male cards are Hakma, also manifesting at various energetic levels. Okay, so same being, just operating at various levels of a spiritual level. So we're talking about energy, various levels of energetic levels. And as we raise our energy, we are able to perceive higher levels of perception. This is the path of fire, will, wisdom, coming from Hakma into the spiritual center of our being, which is Tippereth. His light, the light of reason, brings order to the darkness of the supernals. Okay? His light, the light of reason, brings order to the darkness of the supernals. And this reminds me of a verse in one of the holy books. There's a light so strenuous that it is not perceived as light. And I talked about that earlier. Okay, so we talked about the paths leading from the supernals, the various rivers that flow down into creation. At this level in the Tree of Life, we have been helped by advances in the understanding of the psychological processes involved in the spiritual journey, helping to better understand the cryptic symbology veiled in alchemical texts. Through the study of such great minds as Carl Jung and his teachings about the archetypes, we can better understand how the archetypes manifest themselves in the psyche of the individual. Through the use of the discrimination faculty, we can better understand which archetypes have become dominant in our lives, enabling us to take control of the images arising from the unconscious instead of being a slave possessed by them. If you have not studied Carl Jung, please do. His teachings on the archetypes and how these images or these forces that come out of the supernals work on us, because these images on the major arcana are images of the archetypes, these symbols, and how these various forces are working on us. Most people are very unconscious of which archetypes are dominant in their lives and why they're having problems or having good stuff, you know. So we're going to kind of talk about the cards real quick. I will start with Crowley's card, and I'm going to try to put it here in front of the camera so you can see it. You know, as you know, I'm not the most technology advanced, so I'm just trying to give you a good picture of this card. You see you see the colors of scarlet or red, the colors of Binah, showing the influence, because Binah actually contains all the images, all the ideas of the supernals, and also red for Mars. He has a shield in front of him, the double-headed eagle. The double-headed eagle is, you know, familiar. It kind of represents the secular power, as well as his rule of the powers of the East and the West. He holds a globe surmounted by a Maltese cross, showing his rulership of the feminine aspect, the unconscious aspect of his being. Because circles are generally feminine and squares are male. But he sits upon a cubic throne, representing the manifested universe. And another good thing to point out is the squaring of the circle. There are fleur de lis here, representing the male creative energy, and there are bees, which are attributed to Venus and Daleth, and they're buzzing down here. And so again, it's showing the union of these two forces within the individual. But in this card, he is, and he has a crown, referring to Kether, because this is the ultimate, where the information comes from. Okay. He has rams, of course, are the representing Aries. He has right here, a staff of authority, crowned by a ram's head. And here you see in the corner, Crowley has a weird way of explaining this little lamb with the flag, the lamb of the Christ. Uh, he goes into politics on this. I like to explain it like this. In Masonry, you wear a white lambskin apron that goes over the loins. This is to me, this represents the Mars force, the wild ram domesticated and brought under control. The white apron in Masonry represents the controlling of the lower passions, the purifying of the lower passions. And when we talk about the purifying of the lower passions, it's more the control and direction of them. Again, I've talked over and over about the redirection of the Mars force. The Mars force can be both something destructive or it can be our savior. We talked about the serpent. I talked about the serpent and the symbology behind it, both redeemer and destroyer. That's Crowley's card. Wade's card is pretty simple. Not to take away any of the I love Wade's deck. It's one of the first decks I began to work with. These are the two decks I worked with most in my life. If you work with another deck, the attribution still should be the same. Of course, he is also clothed in red, the color of Mars. He's crowned with the crown of Qesheth. He sits on a cubic throne. He also has rams. He has the scepter, or the staff that his represents union. The circle here, the Ankh. Life. He wears armor, steel, which is attributed to Mars also. Now, something I didn't point out in Crowley's card. When Crowley changed the attribution of his cards, he forgot to put in the Book of Thoth, because in the Book of Thoth he says about this card, even though he now attributes it to path number 28, he says that the light of Chokmah shines down to guide his work. Chokmah represents wisdom, will, the wand, uh, the directed force. Behind him, you see the sun, showing the spiritual center or consciousness of the initiate is now guiding his work. Okay. And something to point out too, this is another meditation, but I will not go into it in this talk. In the new aeon, the emperor is no longer the consort of the empress. Her consort is now the Hierophant. Now, if you're curious about that, I would recommend study on it. I'm not going to go into it tonight or this evening. It would take a tremendously long time to go into that mystery. I try to keep these talks as simple as I can, not because I assume that people are coming at different levels of knowledge on the cards, and I enjoyed teaching about the tarot and the spiritual journey. I'm an initiate of a couple of actually 3 different schools, and it's been my life quest. I don't know everything. All I can do tonight is just kind of point out some things to you and give you some things to meditate on. Okay, in a nutshell, this card represents our reasoning faculty, guided by our spiritual center, observing the images of our unconscious and bringing them into light, enabling us to properly categorize them. Because otherwise, people who don't do enough self-observation, they're not really observing closely what's coming out of the unconscious. And a lot of things come out of the unconscious. And the problem is that's, under the unconscious, of course, is where we receive spiritual messages, but often our unconscious because that comes from the super unconscious. But our personal unconscious is so clouded by repressed feelings, thoughts, memories, just garbage. And so part of the earlier processes is to, clean this up. And that's what initiation does for us. We go through each level and we learn new lessons, and we balance and square, and square the circle for each one of these levels. And as we do this, we're purifying our unconscious, we're purifying our consciousness so that the light can shine through. It's like a dirty light bulb, if it's all up there all dingy, you're that dirty light bulb. You start cleaning that light bulb off, the light begins to shine through. And pretty soon it's just shining. And that is the initiation, of course, of Tippereth. Now, there is a danger in reason, as we all know. We live in a world of reason. We've denied the intuitive, the feminine aspect in the modern world. Our schools are based on reason, on left brain thinking, and without the balance of Daleth, the intuition, our Venus, that force within us, without that balance, we run the risk of having a world like we have today. We have a world that's based totally on solid reason. It denies the feminine intuition, and thus we run into all these problems that we have in society today. So reason can only lead us so far, and that's where they talk about the hidden Sephiroth of the Ot that exists right here. Now we won't. I probably will never discuss that particular Sephiroth, but within it, they say here is the highest that the reason can actually assist us. After that, to jump to the abyss, you'll notice that once you go through the abyss, you're becoming one with the initiate. There's the initiation of the Magi, the initiation of the Master of the Temple, and the Episimus. So these once the initiate has gone to the abyss is the separation between the nominal and phenomenal worlds. Then that being is changed forever at a cellular level. It become you become God. Okay. So, and so this card teaches us again to use reason, to observe the images coming out of the unconscious, to use will, to bring them in at proper order and to categorize them, but not to suppress, but to understand. We'll look at some of the attributions from for this path from 777, and really. In 777 is written, there's a lot of different herbs and different things that were unknown. And so, be creative as a magician to, to attribute different things. And Kabbalah is a filing system of the universe. So whenever you see a plant or something like that, you can actually file it in the proper attribution. I don't know how to put that any better. The animals for this path, of course, are the ram, the owl, and the bear. Now, the reason the attributions are important is because if I was going to do a working to, invoke this energy into my life, I would want to use some of this stuff, certain colors, certain symbols, in order to invoke that energy if I was going to war, or if I needed a, greater concentration or greater passion in my life. The stone is ruby and red stones. The plants are tiger lily and geranium. On the human body is the head and face. The color in the king's scale is scarlet. The perfume is dragon's blood or pepper. The weapon is energy, burin, or the sword. Some of the god forms are Agni, Ares, Mars, Brigid, Mentu, Athena, Shiva, Vulcan, to name a few. We talked about the alchemical correspondence is sulfur, and the process is called calcination. And the Vedic is Rajas. The Holy Book is Liber 7, Chapter 1. We will finish this, I will finish this talk with a reading from the Book of Thoth. Use all thine energy to rule thy thought. Burn up thy thought as a phoenix. I hope you're enjoying these talks, and I hope they're informative. If there's anything else you need me to point out, please leave it in the comment below. I don't get a lot of comments. Uh, when I finish this talk on the major arcana, I will be doing a, hopefully, as slow as I'm going, who knows if I live to do it. Hopefully, I will be doing a talk on the I Ching, another one of my favorite oracles. But this is all I have for now. Again, if you have anything else, any questions, leave them in the comments. I love to talk about this stuff. I love to share it. But for now, 93. Peace out.